friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. I was just headed to the washing machine to put my brand new quilt in. No worries, you didn't miss anything. I have a full tutorial on this quilt. You do not want to miss it. We've got illusion going on. We've got reversible. We have the reason why your mitered corners aren't folded correctly. The ultimate how to connect your binding tails. I mean, I give it all to you, friends, in this one. I've even taken the time to make a pattern just for you. Enough talking already. Let's go. Now here's a real easy way to get a strip set with all those little scrappy pieces that you have cut out. You're going to cut salvage to salvage the contrasting darker color. In this case, it's my grunge gray. And then you're going to take that same width side of the scrappy pieces and you're going to lay them butt up next to each other, side by side, and just keep adding and pinning and adding and pinning. Now you can see here the tip would be that I put the pin in the center of each of those scrappy blocks. Now I pin in the center because I need to sew on both sides of those pieces. So the pin works out perfectly in the center because I don't have to take it off at the sewing machine. I can sew down one side and sew down the other whole side, and all the while it's pinned, and then when I bring it back to my table, of course, then I take the pins out. This is my favorite scrappy strip set technique. Next, you're going to take that long pinned strip over to your sewing machine and you're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch right on that big long side of one of the sides. And you can see my pins right there in the center. When I utilize this pin technique, I always stick myself somehow. So just be careful when you have your pins in the center because you're just not used to it. So yeah, you end up, probably sticking yourself like me. And when you get to the end of that one whole strip set side, you're then going to break thread and then turn your project all the way to the other end that you started on, and then you're going to start sewing a scant 1/4 inch all the way down that side. And you'll notice here too that I don't take the time to take the pins out as I sew. So, one side that you end up sewing, you're going to have the pins facing towards you. I guess I should note that for you. I just find it more efficient to sew all the sides first and then take that whole strip set over to my table and take all the pins out at one time. And you can see everything is nicely sewn down. And then I take it over to my table and I take out all of those center pins. Now there are a couple options here for this next step. You can choose to slice across the separation where the scrap is first, or you can slice down the center evenly in half of that strip length. I found that it was much easier and it gave me much more control to separate first at those scrappy bits right along where they were butt up next to each other. And then I went in and cut each individual strip set right down the center in half. But whatever feels comfortable to you, just do it that way. So you can see here I've taken those scrappy strip sets and I'm cutting them exactly in half. And now I'm going to take it to my pressing station and I'm going to finger press to the dark side. Now I get asked this a ton. Friends, my ironing round station there, it's just particle board and it has a homemade cover over it. But inside, though, it does have batting and it has that, stuff that you put in oven mitts or something like that. I don't know. It's just got a few layers of that. That's all it is, friends. Now let's cut some tiny white squares to snowball the gray and the scrappy strip sets off. You're going to take those white squares and you're going to draw corner to corner on the wrong side of the fabric an X. In the middle of that square where the X meets, you're then going to slice so that you have 2 pieces at first, and then you're going to flip them horizontally and then slice yet again up toward the center part. Now each individual tiny square has its own line from corner to corner in it. Now this is probably the most important step in the entire quilt pattern. Laying your snowballs out, onto this Scrappy strip set, you need to make sure that that gray grunge piece, whatever darker color you choose to put in your quilt, the contrasting color, is facing down on your table. So you're going to lay it out with the Scrappy on top horizontally, like you see here, and then the gray on the bottom. Now you need 2 white squares per strip color set here. You need to first lay the white square down bottom right onto that gray grunge. The next square needs to be top left up on the Scrappy piece. If you do not follow these instructions, friends, your blocks will be off and it will not look like a chain link like what we're trying to go for. It'll be totally off, and then you'll have to unpick, and and then we'll start crying, and it'll just be a bad day, friends. So just make sure that you lay those white squares just like you see me doing here. Now we're going to sew the snowball on, but this is very important as well, friends. Do you see the line right here that we marked? You need to make sure that you sew about 2 to 3 threads worth away from that line toward the corner. That will help when we go to fold it over, that it will match up perfectly. I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. But right now I'm going to sew this down right next to the line, so to speak. And then once I break thread here, I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to sew the other snowball on. Now, you would do this in batch sewing. You wouldn't do this individually like you see me doing here, but I'm just showing you for context what I'm sewing and how I'm sewing next to that line. Here's a close-up of it. I want you just to notice how I'm next to it. Now, you won't be able to tell if you're off just a little bit, like you've sewn too much next to the line. It'll all blend in the end, I promise you. If I was to sew directly on that pencil line that I marked, when I went to fold over that snowball before I pressed it and all that, it just, in that little bit of fold, it takes away just a tiny bit from that corner, and I don't want it to take away from that corner, friends, because I'm working with precise measurements within this quilt. After I've snowballed all the pieces, then I take it over and I trim a 1/4 inch from the stitch line off of that corner, and then I do pre-press with my fingers, finger press, the white piece just over. Now I don't do to the dark side here just because it's easier for that fabric, the white piece, just to flop over. And then of course you see here I'm giving everything a good hot press. Now this next step is very important. I want you to trim these little blocks because you can see the snowballs always get out of shape. They get wonky because everything's on the bias, and that's just the way it is, friends. So what you're going to do is find the middle, line it up on your ruler, and then you're going to trim those corners off so that everything is nice and squared up and even. And you can see here I'm doing another piece, and I'm cutting off quite a bit because I think, I may have sewed a little bit farther away from the line, the marked line, but that's okay because honestly, friends, it all comes out in the end fine. In the cutting instructions in the PDF pattern download, I tell you how to cut each particular square and then pair them together and then work from that point on. But I'm going to show you right here how to do it a lot quicker. All you're going to do is take the size square that you need in that width, and you're going to cut the same width in a strip of the dark grunge, and you're going to cut the strip in the white color. And then what you're going to do is just lay this one down right side up, and then lay your white one right side down, right on top of each other. Again, pop some pins down the center, but be careful that you don't poke yourself, friends. That would hurt. Trust me, I know. So after you have pinned down the center, just like in the last step when we did the grunge and the Scrappy fabric together, you're going to sew down one side and then down the other. And then after you've done that, then you're going to bring it back to your cutting station and you're going to cut that square. So let me do one real quick to show you what one square looks like after you've sliced it. So now you have this with one side and you've sliced it, right? Then you're going to slice down the center, and they should be the same on both sides. You're going to take it to your pressing station, and you are going to press to the dark side. Now that gives you a bunch of these if you do it in the strip method. These pieces go here, 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 and here. Next, I'm going to show you how I make the scrappy and the white piece, which is right here, and right here, right here, and right here. These are all squares that are part of the block. In the written instructions, I tell you how many scrappy squares you need as opposed to how many white pieces you need to make this right here. But if you're going to do the strip method, which gets it done a lot quicker, you take and lay your white strip down face up, and then you just take a bunch of scrappy pieces and you lay them down just like so, butting them up next to each other, just like you saw when we did the grunge gray and the scrappy together. And you're going to do the same thing, pin down the center, sew down one side, and sew down the other side. What this technique does is it gives you two of the same type of scrap, which makes things super fast. Just make sure though, when you go to put them in your quilt blocks, that you don't put two right next to each other, right friends? We don't want that. Oh, and yeah, you do, cut down the middle, which gives you separate pieces like this. Now friends, you will also need 4 sets of corners snowballed just like this. No worries, measurements in the pattern. You'll also need these filler white pieces, and you need the side pieces that close the chains up. As long as you have all the pieces, friends, it's super easy to sew together. Let's put it all together and see what this block's going to look like. The first thing you're going to do is grab one of those white background squares. Then you're going to want to grab 4 of the strip sets that you cut down with the dark gray or the grunge with the light color. These make up the shape of that snowballed, twisty circle. What you're going to do is place one here, and here, and here, and here. Next, you're going to grab these pieces right here where we snowballed the sides and you had to have that white piece of square, the snowball, in the bottom right when it was laying this way, horizontal, on top of that dark piece. That's important, friends. What's important also is to lay these in the correct orientation within this little twisty block. This is what's going to give us the illusion that our block is intertwined. So a good way to remember this, I suppose, is that this is your scrappy piece and it's pointing down and it's pointing toward the center of the white piece. So you always want that piece coming in. And if I was to turn it like this, you can see that now this pointy, scrappy piece is pointing out into nowhere land, and that's not correct. So let's turn this so that this is pointing inward. This is pointing with the white snowball right there. So we're going to place that there. And this one here. Okay, so you can see here we've created this one block. This is horizontal here, the scrappy piece anyways. This is up and down. This is horizontal, and this is up and down. So essentially this is mirroring this piece and this is mirroring this piece as far as placement goes. In my written instructions, you only need one of these blocks. So let's build to the next set of blocks. The other 2 blocks that you need in this quilt will always stem from this main block. The next block you're going to need several of. I can't remember how many though, right offhand. But these will be the blocks that go along the bottom and the side of this quilt. We're going to place that right there. And next you're going to place the scrappy side next to the white, and this as well. And remember, you have 2 sets of each scrappy, so you want to mix this up. You also have 2 sets of each of these as well. And so you'll want to grab from that pile so that you have, just all sorts of different scrappies in there, and place it there. Now once I sew that block up, that is the second block. So this is the first initial block that you'll need to base the other 2 blocks on. This is the second style block, and it has that strip piece there. Now this third style of block, you're gonna need a lot of these. Once you have this connected all here, then you're simply going to add a white piece here and a white piece here. Grab 2 other of the Scrappy and white pieces. Connect that here, connect that there. You can see here we have this right here coming up into this block, and then it's coming over this way. And then of course, you know, the other blocks, which will be just like this, when you put that next to it, this is what that's gonna look like. Now mind you, this one's all sewn up, this one isn't, so I haven't allotted for the seam allowances. That's why that one looks bigger or wider, so to speak. But you can tell that this is going to form the bottom of another one, and this forms the top of this one, and then these go on to form the other one. When you put all of these pieces together, you make one quilt that looks so technical. Your friends are gonna be like, how'd they do that? And then of course you buy them my pattern and you give it to them. This is for my friends out there that need a roadmap on how to actually sew all of these little pieces together, like in what sequence. So what I've done here is I've taken this top row and sewn those 3 pieces together, those 3, and then the bottom part here of the black part or the dark gray part, I've sewn those 3 together. And next what I'll do is I'll take and sew those 3 pieces together, making that one single block. Next what I'll do is I will sew these pieces together, then I will connect this to this sewn piece, connect these together, and then that will be sort of like the bottom row to this block, and then I'll just flip it over right sides together and sew that together. I hope that makes sense, friends. The sequence I just shared with you on how to sew these pieces all together, that was just how I did it. But you can sew this in any configuration that you want as long as you get to the same result as this right here. Once you have all of your blocks all lined up, then it's time to sew all of the rows together. So for reference, I don't want you to be confused. So these right here are most of the blocks. Remember we talked about that. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these blocks up top, and then I want you to note that block right here. That goes all the way down the side of this quilt. The one singular block in this quilt is this one right here. And that I've already sewn to the bottom, and you can see all of these pieces go all along the bottom as well, except for this corner piece, which gives us, you know, the width and length that I want for this particular quilt. So what I've done is I've taken some of these ahead of time, as you can see here, like 4 of these blocks, and sewn these together. I sew in chunks when it comes to sewing quilts like this. So I'll take this chunk and sew it, another chunk, and so on and so forth, or I took this whole row and sewed it together because it was the same, and then I just piece it all together like a puzzle. These are the little border strips that go around this quilt, and you'll need, I forget how many, but my pattern will tell you. All you're going to do is cut to the specifications in the pattern and snowball these ends, you know, connect these 3 little scraps together. And then what happens is these will go on the outside here, connecting that little link together. How cute, right? So what happens when you make this link, you have this dead space here that you need to fill in with the background. This will further the illusion that you have all of your links done with all scraps. And plus, this gives it a little something different all along the outer edge. Now you could have possibly, if you want to get real creative, you could have taken this and made this all one color, you know, to give it like a solid link around. You could have done that, but I chose to go with, you know, the Scrappy. So what you're going to do is grab pieces that are contrasting to the link that's already there. And then you're going to add your white. Just for reference, all of the white little pieces, the filler pieces for this tiny border, they are always going to be right next to a black piece there. Once you have the main portion of your entire quilt sewn up with the illusion, then I think it's fun to just add in some skinny borders around that to frame it all in, just so that your eye draws toward the center, which is, you know, the show of the quilt, all of the Celtic twists. To carry out the illusion, I added that first skinny border in the same white fabric that I used throughout the center of the quilt. And that just extended it out so that you could really see those smaller links that encase the entire quilt main part. To showcase that center portion even more, I decided to take some of that grunge gray and again frame the entire thing out. And I really do think it worked, friends. Now, I love trying new ideas within my quilt. So here's my new idea in today's quilt. I snowballed those grunge gray corners on my quilt to match a fun confetti border that I was going to put again on the outside, framing it all in. I really thought it would be fun to incorporate the angle from the Celtic twists or Celtic twists, however you say it, into those corners with the same angle that's within the, you know, the twisty bits. And it's a simple add-in. You just do exactly what you did on the blocks earlier to snowball the corners. Super simple way to give a big impact on a quilt. And then I just took that confetti border in a wide width and sewed borders all around the entire quilt. This is the last border though, friends. I'm not doing any more than that. I mean, by this point, I was bordered out, no doubt. But look at the impact, friends. It looks so sharp. I just love how this turned out. My vision is finally coming to life in this illusion Celtic twist quilt. I wanted to do something different on the back of this quilt. Now, mind you, most of my ideas come from wanting to do something different just because I want to be different. But this time, this backing is coming out of necessity. From the beginning, I did not choose a backing for this quilt. So it was going to be up for grabs and inspiration toward the end. I thought, what if I took all of my rose fabrics, light and darks, in fat quarter sizes, and just started sewing them together like patchwork? What would that turn out like? So that's what I've done. I've chosen 22 fat quarters, and a couple of the fat quarters are a bit shy, like this one here. But I'm praying and hoping that I have enough to cover the back of this quilt with whatever I end up doing. The first thing I'm going to do is pair up a light and dark together and just first sew those two together and go from there. So we'll take this one and let's pair up. And we're going to do longwise on this, so the longest part of the fat quarter. And fat quarters are typically 18 by 22 or 21 by 18 or 19 or something like that. This one. So I'm going to put right sides together and I'm going to sew along the long side. You can take your fat quarters from yardage. I did on a lot of these, just so you know. Sometimes you just gotta cut up what you got. And I'm not one for saving fabric either. If I have it, I want to use it because I bought it for a reason, and you know what? Life is short, friends. Use your fabric. Okay, so we have one set sewn. This one is short, and I think I might have a short, darker one in here to add that to. I don't know. And I don't know, we may need more, friends. I just don't know until I'm done. This dark one here. This one. Okay, friends, I'm going to do this. And when I get back, all of these should be paired up and sewn together. And yes, press them. So I've been busy cutting. This is what I think I'm going to go with. I took these pieces that I connected together, trimmed off the edge, and then I cut a 5-inch in width strip. Now you want to make sure that whatever size strip width that you cut, that they're all the same. That way, if you have to connect them together, like here, this is one piece and then this is another piece, you're going to be able to line them up. And I figured if I staggered them, that it would look, you know, kind of cool. So that's what I did there. So let me just show you on this one. I haven't cut this one yet. And then we'll see how many pieces we need to finish the back of this quilt. So the first thing I do, of course, is take and trim the edge up here. And I'm using this ruler. It has a lip on it, so it catches on the edge of your table. I find that that's really useful because my ruler wants to shift all the time. And I have my dumbbell, of course, that I'm going to put on there because it never fails, friends. It shifts. So the most important thing about trimming this edge off straight that I want to make sure that you know is that where this is connected on the seam, where we connected the two fabrics together, that line on your ruler should be perfectly straight right on top of that seam. That's going to tell us that we have a straight edge if we know that this is straight. We have to use some type of guide. If we didn't do that, it would be wonky. And, you know, I like straight lines. I'm a quilter. When I want to make them straight, that is. Once you have that line all measured up on top of the seam, you're then going to just slice it. And since I don't have a big enough table here, long enough, I'm going to, you know, readjust my ruler down here now for the second part of this. I'm making sure that the line on my ruler is on the seam again and everything is straight. Put that on there and then go ahead and slice. Now that gives us a super straight edge. We know it's straight because we measured it on the seam. So now I'm going to flip it over this way. But I'm also going to, again, match up a line on my ruler horizontally with that seam. It's important, friends. You know how they say measure twice, cut once. It's the truth, friends. It's the truth. Trust me. I've been there. I don't know how many times. I thought I had it and I didn't. And I cut and yeah, on all kinds of different things I've done that too. So I've learned over time to be patient with the cuts and to just know that, you know, if I take my time and measure twice, that it's all going to work out. I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of these, and then I'm going to mix and match all over and then see what I need to do on the very tops and bottoms, because as you can see here, let me get my stool. Oh, no, maybe you can't see. I don't know if the camera's showing that or not. But it's not going to be enough on the top, so as we stagger them, I'm going to need to cut off one of the ends of one of these, or 2, 3, 4, I don't know, and sew them into the column, so to speak, up top or in the middle or wherever, just so that we have enough to cover the length of this quilt. So let me do all that and then I'll turn the camera back on and we can see what's going on. Now it might be the next day, I don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, it definitely is the next day. But you can see I have all of my strips cut and everything is lined up the way I want it. Now it's time to sew all of those strips together. How I did that was I started with 2 strips at a time and sewed 2 strips at a time, and then sewed 2 to 2 and then 4 to 4 until I had my entire back. I like to try different things, and that's just my personality. So I sandwiched this quilt on this small table that I have, and I sandwiched it first with the backing on first. I know it's like, you know, not the way you're supposed to do it, right? But that's me. So the first thing you have to do, of course, is make sure that your batting is nice and flat, and you have to anchor one of your sides, top or bottom, down to that batting. And that's what the top part is here in the video. It's already anchored down, and then I rolled up the rest of that backing, and then, you know, I added the spray adhesive after that, and so on and so forth. And you can see here how I'm doing it. That first part is anchored, and now I'm just rolling this on. And what I'm doing is I'm shifting the entire backing with the batting every time I do that. So I'm pulling it back or I'm pulling it side to side depending on what needs to be adhered next. You know, it did save my knees a little bit though. I will tell you that. I mean, I didn't have to get down on the floor to do anything. And here I'm just finishing up the bottom portion or the top of the quilt. I don't know which one this is. And then I did cut off the excess there of the batting. So what I'm doing here is I'm just placing that quilt top on top of the batting and the backing because I have to figure out the sides and where it meets up. You can see, you know, I had to cut off one whole side of the backing because, or one whole strip, I mean, because it was too big, but it is what it is. So you can see here, I'm anchoring the one end, top or bottom, I don't know which it is, down, and then I'm shifting the quilt, spraying, and then anchoring that top or bottom portion there on the corner down, and I'm using my hands to make sure that I'm spreading things nice and flat and evenly because I want that to adhere. And then I take and I move the entire quilt to the next portion that I need to spray. But before I do that, I'm rolling up that quilt top, exposing all of that batting, and then I'll go from there because you can see in the bottom of the video here, that's already adhered, so we're good to go there. That can hang off. It's not going to go anywhere. And then I'm just going to continue spreading. And that's how I did it on the tabletop. And I like to do different things to show you all that there are so many different ways to do things in quilting. And, you know, this is just another version of a quilt getting sandwiched. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Would you try it on a table? Or maybe you do it on a table already. I don't know. The only problem that I could see with this technique, doing it on a smaller tabletop that wasn't as big as my entire quilt, was the fact that my batting was very creased and wrinkled. So if I'm going to do this again, I'm going to put that in a dryer or I'm going to press it. And I did not do that with this batting. But I was noticing that that was one of the biggest problems. The other problem was when the batting hit the corners of my table, it kind of punched out a permanent hole kind of in it. So yeah, live and learn. Okay, so here's the setup for my free motion quilting. And I do have a short video on my channel, check it out, on how to get those hooks up in the ceiling and then the twill tape with the binder clips on the end. And what this does is it holds up the sides of my quilt while I'm free motion quilting, so that way I don't have any drag happening. Drag is a drag, friends, exactly what the word describes. There's no doubt about it. And you'll know when you hit drag because your stitches will either tighten up or you'll be pulling, and yeah, it's just a mess. It's a mess, friends. So yeah, those hooks in my ceiling, my husband calls those meat hooks. So yeah, I have a couple of meat hooks in my sewing room up top on my ceiling, and it's a game changer. And yes, my sewing machine is on its side. It is a Juki TL18 QVP, and I got it at Juki Junkies. Check out my link below. So the design that I am free motion quilting is called Geometric Graffiti. I came up with this one a while ago when I did my color wheel round quilt. You can check that out on my channel too. And I remember I did it in black thread. Well, with this one, I thought the black would overpower it, so I just went with just a white thread. And what it is very forgiving, let me tell you. I mean, this is like the go-to if you just need to be mindless as you do this. I cross over many times over my lines, which they say in free motion quilting that you shouldn't in quilting in general, but I do. I cross over all kinds of lines with this one. I start off with making like a box, and it doesn't even have to be an actual square. It can be a wonky square, and then I go into a triangle, and I might zigzag through a line. And the illusion here, if you will, is that when you look at it as a whole, it just looks like a bunch of geometric shapes all over the place. I mean, check it out. I just love the feeling that this gives when I look at this. I mean, it looks so intricate, but yet It was just like me scribbling with thread. That's really all it was, friends. What do you think of this design? I mean, it's super easy. Just give it a try, and I promise you, you can do this one, friends. I promise. So now it's time to square up this quilt. I have a go-to technique every time I go to square up any quilt that I do, and that is to do the corners first and then go in and do the sides and the top and the bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my square ruler, lay it down on one of the corners. So you can see here I have 1, 2, 3 and 3/4 of border here up to where this dark line is. And over here, I have 1, 2, 3 and 3/4 up to that dark line. So we're doing good, friends. When I see that, I get excited. Now, will it be like that on all 4 corners? I don't know. We're going to have to see. So I'm going to shoot for on every corner 3 3/4 up to this dark line here. Before I cut this though, I'm going to look here and I'm going to add another ruler and butt it up right against here and see if that indeed gives me a straight cut that way. And it does on that side, but let's take a look over here. If I butt this ruler up, we are good to go all the way down. So that is promising, friends. So I'm going to move this out of the way and I'm going to go ahead and keep this lined up. And then I'm simply going to just cut this squared off part only. And I'm just going to veer off just like that. Since I'm not left-handed, I'm going to just cut this awkward like, but you would cut it, you know, right on top of it like you normally would. Three 3/4 is what we're looking for on all 4 corners. Just grab this one here. You want to make sure that it's laying nice and as flat as possible in order to get these nice cuts. I'm always trying to get the nicest shot for you all. Okay, that looks good. Now we're going to lay our ruler down. Just, you know, if this one is going to be more shy, then we're going to have to adjust in the other areas. But we're going to hope for the best, friends. 3 and, if I were to go 3 3/4, yeah, that looks good. Okay, how about over here? May have to give it a tug there, you know. We've all been there, right? And we're going to do 3 3/4 over here. So it looks good there. Come down just a little bit there. Yeah, okay, friends. And again, I'm going to take this ruler here. Hopefully you can see. Let me go up a little bit there. If I line this up, make sure I'm good here. Yeah, I was a little off. Okay, so this looks good here, 3 3/4, 3 3/4. Now I'm going to butt this up here and see where this line is, and yeah, that looks good, friends. I'm happy with that. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to butt this up here, and that one looks good as well. Woo, we are 2 for 2. Let's go ahead and cut this and get this off of here. Okay, friends, let's go to the next corner. I hope you all are rooting for me here. I know I'm rooting for myself. Oh. Now this all takes practice, friends. I'm not gonna lie to you here. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. In order to get nice square corners on your quilt, it all comes down to how well you pieced your quilt. And that just comes with practice over and over and over again doing this. And make sure that everything is nice and flat before you start doing any cutting and measuring. Or measuring and cutting, I should say. Okay, let's see how well we did on this one. 1, 2, 3 3/4 is there, and 3/4 is there. Now this one is only off by just hairs, okay? Now I want you to notice here that this is about less than an eighth maybe, or an eighth of an inch. I'm missing border there, but that's okay because you know what's going to happen? Our binding is going to cover that, so it's fine. But I need to check this. I need to make sure that this is straight as it can be. Make sure you don't move this ruler like I just did. Looks good. Oh, I'm getting excited. We might be 3 for 3, friends. Okay, this one's a little off. I spoke too soon. When I put this one straight, but it may not be laying straight, so you might want to just recheck that. And you know what I do? I tug sometimes to get it where it needs to go. It's okay to tug, friends. You're not going to hurt it. Yeah, I think that's all that needed to happen there. We're still good. We're good. We're good. See, I just needed to bring this down this way a little bit. All right, friends, let's cut this. All right, let's go to the last corner. All right, let's take a look. Okay, now let's go in for the sides. I'm just going to show you one of these because, you know, you don't need to see me cut all 4 sides, do you? Now it's important too to make sure that everything is nice and flat. So before I go in to cut this side portion right here, I need to line back up my ruler along the square here. Line that up just where you cut it. And then I'm going to take my long ruler. Now I do have a longer one than this, but I'm just going to use this one for the sake of time because it's right here. And I'm going to butt this ruler up right to this ruler again. And you can see that this is still 3 3/4. It's up. And we're going to butt this up. And I'm just trying to see a little bit of white showing through my ruler right here to get this nice and cut. Because what happens when we quilt our quilts, everything shrinks up. And depending on how you quilted it or in the moment where it was positioned, you know, it all matters. And it might suction in more on one side than the other. So I have this pretty good. The goal, 1, 2, 3 3/4. And that's about what that is, friends. And so that tells me I'm good to go there. Sorry if you can't see. I'm in the way, I know. Okay. I think I need a new blade in here. Okay, now to do the other little bit that's left on this top, this is either the top or bottom, I don't know. I chose the shorter end here of the sides to show you. We're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to line it up along this corner, square ruler, at where it shows 3 3/4. Then I'm going to take my long ruler, butt it up against there. Oh, that looks beautiful, friends. Oh, my word. Okay. Oh, my goodness. Then I'm going to hold this down, and I'm going to go ahead and slice it because it looks good. Now that is perfectly a straight edge, friends, along my quilt. And I know my other ones are going to line up because of my squares on the corner. And that's how I square up a quilt. It's time to bind this quilt. Now I've had this fabric right here hanging around for a long time in my sewing room because I just, you know, didn't have really any place for it to go into anything. But I thought it would make a perfect binding for this quilt because it does have roses on it and it has like this black charcoal gray type look and it's a stripe, and stripes always look cute as a binding on a quilt. And this is an old one probably. It's Harbor Springs by Minnick and Simpson, Moda Fabric Supplies, modafabrics.com, number 14300. If anybody's interested. My width on this is, what is it? You know, I just cut it last night, so let's see here. Sometimes I cut 3 inches, sometimes I don't. This one is actually 2 3/4 inch bind on this one. So let's get this quilt down. So cute. And let's see, where are we going to start at? We're going to start on the side here. And I do have my table here, whoop, to the left to help me. A lot of you don't seem to understand binding and connection at the end and all that, so I'm going to take you through it. No worries, friends. I know what it's like to be frustrated and really not know how to do something and you really don't have the answer. Watch this binding tutorial. You'll know all the answers and what you need to know and how to do it at the end. Super easy connection hack. If I can find the end here. Start the binding here on the back, and you can roll up your quilt if you want, you know, so you don't have all this like me, but you know what, I'm in the moment and I just do what I do. I don't know. So I'm going to leave about, let's see, what is this? This would be 10 inches, this would be 20. I'm going to leave probably about 15 inches, okay, right there, of hang. I'm going to connect that all at the end though. So the first thing I'm going to do is the 15-inch mark here. I'm going to lay that down on the edge of the back of my quilt on one of the side parts of my quilt. Because you never want to end like at the top or bottom. I don't know why, but you just don't want to. So I'm just going to slip this underneath here. And I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew that down. Make sure everything's nice and flat. Line things up. I don't typically pin this, so yeah. You're going to go forward and you're going to back stitch right there. Yes, you are. You can even check it too to make sure before you go any farther that this is going to hit where you want it to. And by hit, I mean it's going to cover this entire area here. So I'm going to flip this over just to see what that looks like. Looks good. I like that. I do prefer a wider binding in the front. I don't know why. I just do. I don't know. So I'm just going to keep going here until I get to the corner, and I'm going to show you that too. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera so you can see up close and personal. It's super simple to miter a corner on a quilt with your binding. So what you're going to do is continue sewing this raw edge to this raw edge of your quilt corner here, and you're going to stop about a 1/4 inch right before the edge of where this end here ends. So you're going to stop about right there. And you can measure it if you want. I eyeball it, but you know. And your needle's actually going to be stopping in this area right here. Right there. Exactly where I'm pointing. That is where your needle, well, maybe down there a little bit. Right there. So you're going a 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, and you're going to stop right there. You're stopping a 1/4 inch before the end, and you're a 1/4 inch away. And you should have a straight shot right here to the corner, and I'll show you why that's important here in a minute. So I'm going to continue sewing all the way until I get to a 1/4 inch away from the end. You don't want to go too far though, friends, either. So I am about a 1/4 inch from the end, and I have a straight shot to the corner there, see? Now what I'm going to do, put that back down there. I'm going to pivot this corner so that this corner is now facing me. It's pointing right at me, that corner, right there. Boom, right at me. you want to lift your presser foot too to pivot that. And then you're going to put your presser foot back down once that angle is pointing right at you. And then you're going to sew right off of the end and break thread down and there. And you can see what that does is when you lift that up, it's like angled right toward there at a 45. Now that's important to do that, to sew off there and break thread, because the next step is to take this tail, what's left here, lift it up and over like so. Now you can see what this did, it angled that, right? Because this is another key part right here, friends. And you can use the line on your sewing bed, I do sometimes. This right here, this raw edge of your quilt, the next area that you're going to sew, should be in a straight line right along this edge right here. Look at that. I have my window open, friends. And that blew my thread right out of the needle. Oh my goodness. Oh. Let's see. There we go. Get in there. That was weird. Okay. That's never done that before. Okay, so we have our straight edge right here. Raw edge, raw edge, raw edge. That's straight right there. The next step, hold this down like so. This right here. Hold that 45 down. Then you're going to take your tail and lift it back up and over. And I'm still pinching this down right here. Back up, over. Take this hand and pinch this fold. I'm going to have to switch hands here because I got my camera. I'm trying to show you guys. So I'm going to switch hands and pinch that 45 there with this hand. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that this fold of this tail is lined up with the raw edge of this side right here. And I'm going to pinch that down just like so. Pinch that down. Now I should have all those layers are pinched in there, right? And then I can let go of this one because now I'm pinching here. Hopefully you can see. Oh my goodness. I'm like a contortionist back here. All for you to get the shot. So I'm holding this down. This raw edge now needs to line up with this raw edge of your quilt. Just like so, while holding that down. See, friends, look at this. Even Moda fabric is stringy. Look at that. That's stringy. I don't like that. Sometimes it's not as good as, you know, what they say it is. So now I'm going to take, while pinching this, and I'm going to pivot my entire quilt so that now I'm sewing down this edge. And you can clip that too to hold that for you if you need to while you readjust. But that fold, let me show you. That fold is right there along that edge. And this is lined up. And now I'm going to come along and start right at the edge here and sew that 1/4 inch all the way down, connecting it until I get to the next corner, and then I'm going to do the same thing. And I, for whatever reason, I do a back stitch here, friends. I don't know why. I think it's just, I don't know why, my thing. You just keep going and going until you get to the next corner. And don't worry, I'm going to do all my corners and I'm going to come back until I get to the very end, and then I'm going to show you what to do. Super easy how to connect binding. As promised, I'm going to show you how to sew these two together so it is seamless. Make sure that you have both of these tails. Remember, we started sewing at the beginning here all the way around, and this was our tail that we had hanging, left over. And then we stopped with this gap here, and I made sure to backstitch right there. The opening here between the start and the stop point is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, about 13 inches or so. I wouldn't go any less than that because things get tight in here. So that's a good reminder for you. The best tip that I'm going to give you with this particular technique is whatever size width that your binding that you cut, you can do this regardless. So if you are cutting a 3-inch width binding or a 2.5 or a 2 3/4, you can use any width, but you have to be sure to use that same measurement when we cut, and I'll show you how. Find the center between these two marks, and we're going to go boom, 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 and it's right there. I'm going to just mark that right there because that's a center point in my gap here. This strip right here, I'm just going to pull over and just lay over like that. And then all I'm going to do is come in and cut this so that it is right in the center there. Okay, and then I can take that clip out because I now have cut that to the center of this gap. Now I used a 2 3/4 inch width binding. So what I'm going to do is lay this one over top of this one here. And I'm going to find myself a ruler. Just like that. So there was the middle of our gap. Remember, we cut that piece of fabric. Then I took this, the ending tail, I ended right there. That's my stopping point. And then I lay this one right over top. Make sure that everything is nice and taut too, that it's laying down, there's no gappage or anything like that. Lay this one nice over that. Now this is the center. I'm gonna just, no, wait a minute, where is it? No, the center's over here. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna mess this all up. So I'm just gonna clip that right there, just the middle of that clip. So the middle of that clip, where I clipped it, that is the center between the gaps. Lay this down right on top of that. So we know that that's the center. From that center point, where the edge of this fabric is, I'm going to measure over 2 3/4 inches. And I'm going to mark it. So I'm going to just move that out of the way now. Okay, so I'm going to just put my ruler right there. Okay, so we got 1 and 2, and I need to go to 3/4. So that's right here where my ruler is, the mark on my ruler. And I'm going to lay this over top of here. Nice and taut. And then I'm going to lift that pen right up there. And that is where I'm going to make my mark, right there on this fabric right here. And let's see, let's make sure that we make a straight line on this because we are going to be trimming this on that line. Now remember, I measured from this point over on this one. We're taking that right there, measuring from there over, and that is 2 3/4. Now, if I was to do a 3-inch width binding, I would go 3 inches over from that mark. So I hope you guys can understand that. And then once I have this marked here, on this one only, then I'm going to go in. Hopefully I can cut a straight line here. Oh my goodness, I can't even see it with all the lines. And I'm going to cut straight right there. Don't be scared, friends. Just cut it. I'm always scared when I go to cut because, you know, I've messed up a lot. So in my life, I'm cutting and measuring. Okay, next. So before we go and try to connect these together, I'm going to lift this up and I'm going to gather up this slack here because we don't want that. That's gonna, you know, hinder us from sewing these two pieces together. We're all set. So next I'm going to open this up and you can see here how it's coming out. There's the top of that fold. You're just gonna open it and just lay it right there. Then you're going to take this one and you're gonna open it just like so. And this one though, you are going to flip toward this way. And then you're going to line up these just like this, squared off. See there. Pin up here. And pin down here. And then across the bottom here. From that corner, we need to find the corner over here. The corner is right here, right there, see? I can't see it, so I'm gonna make a mark there so I know what it is. So from that corner to this corner. We're going to sew directly on that line, and then I'll be right back. So that's what that looked like. We're going to, let's see if you can see there. I'm going to take out these pins. We're just going to flip this like this because we're definitely going to check this before we go any further. It'd be the worst thing, friends, if you did all this work and then this wasn't correct and you just, you know, cut your seam allowances and, you know, whatever. So next we're going to unclip and we're going to do a check. This is how you check. You're going to open that up like that after you've, you know, taken the clip off the slack and see how this is laying right there. If this is too loose, take this out and redo it. If it's too tight, say, and you got like all this pucker here or something, then it's too tight. You're gonna have to figure out and maybe add more fabric in there because you probably, you know, messed up, whatever. But no, this one looks good. So when I lay that like this, it's nice and taut. There's no, you know, nothing making me think that it's messed up. So that tells me that it's okay to go ahead and cut these excess seam allowances off of here. So that's what I'm gonna do, friends. Oh my word, this quilt has been a long haul, I'll tell you that. So we're gonna cut off all the excess, leaving about 1/4 inch there. And then you'll take it to your ironing station and you'll open this up and you'll press it. You know the drill, right, friends? And so once I press that, which I'm going to right now, once this is all nicely pressed, you know, nice, fold it back down, you run it through your sewing machine, 1/4 inch to where you started, and then you're going to fold over and sew on the fold part of the binding onto the front. This is one of the tips I wanted to make sure that I told you about. When you're done sewing that first leg of your binding on, you're then going to flip it like this, and you're just going to press it in the direction that you want it to go. You just want to make sure that you do this. This is going to like really help you out, friends, because this binding, because it's folded over, it just doesn't want to go sometimes. And then, you know, you end up shy because it doesn't want to fold over all the way, and then you can, you know, miss the the fold with your thread. How many times have we all done that, right? I have done it, especially at the beginning when I was first quilting. I would always, and I still do it, friends, so, you know, it doesn't get too much better, but this aids in that process of you getting this to go over to the side you want it to and to sew it. And plus, our binding here, I mean mine anyways, is a little thicker than normal, and I prefer it that way because I think probably because it helps me get, you know, all that fold inside the stitch. I don't know. So we're just going to flip that. This is a huge tip, and not a lot of people do this, I don't think. I mean, I don't hear of people doing it unless they just do it and they don't show it in their videos. But I've just found that this is a good tip. One tip I'm going to give you here is that this right here, this 1/4 inch seam with the stitches are right here, this whole side needs to be tucked inside of here. And what I see a lot of on some quilts, and I don't know if you do it or not, I mean, I just figure I might mention it in case this might help. When you fold this over, it needs to be taut, but not too tight. You need to be able to just feel that this is in here. There should be no gapping in here. So it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be just folded over haphazard. And you see that? I can pinch all that in there. That's just fabric. There's no bind in there. You need to make sure that this is folded over. No matter what size width you have, you need to make sure that you do this. This needs to be taut, but not tight. Now, if it was too tight, this is what it would look like. And then this would be all balled up in there, and that's no good either. So it's a happy medium, friends, always in quilting. So I'm just folding this over nice, taut, but not too tight. And I'm just sewing right along the edge. And you should always have a guide when you are sewing your binding on. My guide is that this fold, when it is folded over here, and I have pulled it taut but not tight, the edge of this fold right here is like somewhere right along the edge of this side of my presser foot. You should always have a guide no matter what when you're sewing, because you should never be looking at the needle going up and down. That will throw you off and you will definitely start sewing crooked. I did that for the longest time when I first started sewing. You just want to try and stay consistent. We're coming up to the corner, friends. The first thing that you need to look at before you get to this corner and miter it is stop, I don't know, a few inches before the end, right? And just look at it for a second. You see how it's folded this way so that there is kind of like a pocket right here. So this is kind of bulky right here. You want to make sure that you fold it in a way that when you end up folding it, that like say if you just did it this way, you know, because this is how you were sewing it, so to speak, and you just folded it that way and then folded it back this way, I want you to notice something. You see the fold right here? This is like 2 layers of fabric right there, not to mention this right here that's in here. So we got 1, 2, 3, plus if we folded it like this, we would have these 2 pieces here folded, plus this inner fabric and this side inner fabric. That is bulk, friends. You do not want that. So make sure that you check that. You do not want these going the same angled way. What you want is to not do it, fold it that way first. You want to lift it up. Sorry about my camera there. Let me see if you can get a better shot here. You want to fold it up this way first, taut, but not tight, not too tight. And then this side over here, I want you to take note. You can see where the edge of the quilt top is in this right here. Now, when I go to fold this over, as long as I am hinging it within this area right here, I hope you know what that means by hinge. You're just going to flip. I'm going to hold my fingernail right there on that edge. And I'm just going to push this over. My nail is still there, but I want to make sure that I get that right on the fold and that this side stays tucked. And when I do that, friends, I want you to see the magic here. You will have a perfect miter, friends. I guarantee you. I guarantee you. But you have to make sure, this is what some are doing, and I'm not saying it's you. Some are just folding this like, okay, let me see. Some are just doing this. They're just folding it up, and then they're like, oh man, it's not mitered, right? Some are just like not worrying about this inside area. This inside area is so important when it comes to a perfect miter. So like I said, some are just folding up, and I used to do it too, friends, and I wouldn't worry about tucking this in, and then I started tucking this in, but then I wasn't tucking it in far enough. I would maybe go to there, and then I would still put this over, and I'd be like, wow, it's still shy. What am I doing wrong here? Like you can see, it's not even matched up. This tip is the deal breaker when it comes to mitering these quilt corners. So let me get my camera set up here because we're going to do it right this time. So we double checked to see which way first we're going to fold. We know that we need to come up this way first. So we push that up, taut but not too tight. I'm going to make sure that this right here, this is where I'm going to hinge it, where it's the edge of this actual quilt. It's right in here. You can feel it even with your finger. Make sure that this is pushed all the way that way. Then I'm going to lift this while keeping my finger there. Or you could probably do this. Let's do this. I'm going to leave that right there. I'm going to leave that right in that crook. this pokey thing, I think. I don't know. So then I'm going to lift up like so. Pinch that down, pull that out, and look, friends. I hope you can see that that is perfect. Wait a minute. If I can hold it. Let me move this out of the way. That is absolutely perfect, friends. Right? Perfect. Oh my goodness. I hope you can understand how that all works in there. It's very important, every single step in quilting. I know, if it's not one thing, it's another, right? Well, let's go ahead and finish this corner up, and then we'll look at the reveal of this quilt. You can even go ahead and pop a clip right there so that that's nice and taut. And then push your nail over and then flip that for your perfect miter. Yes. And I'm just going to hold this down while I do this. And right when I get on top of that piece that's showing right here, then I'm going to lift my presser foot, pivot, unclip, make sure I'm folded over nice, drop that presser foot, and then continue on. Look at that miter, friends. It's amazing, right? And on the back, you have this real tiny one. How cute, cute, cute. And I can take and, you know, stitch this down, hand sew it, or I can do, you know, what I've done in my short videos. I've showed you where you stop here, go up one side, go over, and come down another to attach that in. But I think I'm going to hand sew these ones. So yeah, that's all there is to it, friends. The final reveal, friends. Oh my word, this one has been a long time in the making. It's taken over a couple months for me to make this quilt. No lie. I have to be honest though, friends, ever since my shingles, it's taken me longer to do anything. So I'm lucky to get this done in a couple months. Not only did I finish this quilt, but I also made a pattern for you. And that takes a lot of time, friends. So do me a favor and look below this video where it says hype, and hype this video up so that YouTube will show it to more people. YouTube is a tough game, friends, especially when your health is not up to par and you miss a bunch of weeks in posting. YouTube is brutal. Your numbers go down, and yes, so does your pay. So yeah, everything's down on my channel, but you can hype it up by hitting that hype button, hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe, putting it on all of your social medias, and yeah, that truly does help me out a lot, friends. So thank you in advance for that. But enough of that. Let's talk about this amazing illusion quilt. This one, honestly, I took my time and I just had fun with it. I did not even know that it was going to end up being a reversible quilt. I had no clue because, you know, I never know when I start what it's going to end up like. So, yeah, what do you all think? Some of the thoughts on this quilt are, I'm glad that I put these tiny links here on the side because I do feel like it does frame the entire quilt up. I do love this right here, the 45-degree angle to incorporate through the rest of the quilt. Yeah, I mean, this was a fun quilt. And the back, oh my word, it was fun too. It took just as long to make that. Well, maybe not as long as it did to make the front, but it was like making another whole quilt top, friends. I really do hope that you all found even a little bit of value in today's video. If you did, let me know down in the comments. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, I love you and take care.